down here at the bottom of Resolve on my screen, there's a bunch of different pages in Resolve, which are correspond to parts of the post-production process. So from media management to editing, Fusion, which is VFX or motion graphics, color grading, Fairlight, which is audio, and then delivering. So all these different stages of the process are available within Resolve. So you can do almost all of post-production in it, which is a great reason to not have to go to different apps or link apps and send things back and forth between apps, between people, that kind of a thing. I really like it for that, especially for the projects where I'm working on my own. I can go through the entire process without having to send things out to an audio program and to a separate color grading program. It's really nice as a small team or a solo operator to just have it all right there so I can do uh, whatever I need to. Let's see. Timothy says paid for the studio version. Yep, it's great value. So one-time cost. For those who are wondering about the difference between the free version and the studio version, 96% of everything an editor might do is available in the free version. The main limitation is that it's limited to Ultra HD resolution, 3840 by 2160. So you can't do bigger than that. If you try to render something at 3840 by 2161, it will not work. You won't be able to do that. But for 4K Ultra HD resolutions from most exports, that's going to be enough. There are other features like some effects, some color grading, extra features, a couple settings for all sorts of different advanced things like 3D and noise reduction and a lot of other. I don't know. It's hard to go over the full list, but it's mostly like advanced effects that if you're editing a short film, you might not ever run into that need. All right. So let's jump in to um a couple things here. Oh, and before we get going too far, make sure that if you're not talking, you mute yourself, just so we're not hearing anything you don't want us to hear. And you are free to unmute yourself if you do have a question and want to chime in. All right. I think that's all I want to say about that. So let's let me address the question about getting stuff from the iPhone first, because we're going to talk about getting media into your project. For is anyone else shooting on iPhone and bringing that in? It's a couple ways to go about this, but I think it's a more common need as we go. I've been shooting more on my phone as well, which is great. Um, so for anyone who is doing that, you may want to. There's a couple different formats that iPhone can do, and the high efficiency uh, codec is a setting somewhere in iPhone settings, camera, and then you can change which format it is. So if you're bringing the high efficiency codec into Windows, it might not work the same as it would on Mac. I think it's compatible across the board on Mac. But generally, once you airdrop those onto your computer or use another capture app and bring that in, it should all be compatible and able to be dropped into your project. Linda's wondering, what is the color space for iPhone? What are going to be the settings? Depends on what app you shoot and what you set it as. So when you record on iPhone, if you're using the default app, you can actually set somewhere in the app settings, whether you're recording standard definition or HDR. The HDR settings are going to be Rec 2020. Otherwise, it's Rec 709, which is fairly standard. We'll go over color management just a little bit, not color grading, but just making sure that the colors are looking correct for the footage that we're using. All right, for those new, let's just go to the beginning of the process. So as we get started with, we just finished shooting a project, let's say, you want to start a new project in Resolve. So let me actually just use my mouse and go here. So we've got actually, I'll just go use this section. So in the lower right corner, I've got a project manager button right here. This is in this lower corner. There's a little house icon. If I click on that, this is also the first thing that'll show up when you launch Resolve. This is the project manager. Um, the way it's laid out is you have a project library. I actually have a couple here, but this is a database of projects. It doesn't really work the same way that things like Final Cut Pro does or Premiere, where you have individual project files that live on your computer. In Resolve, everything is within a database that's in the app. So there's a couple reasons for that. One is it's faster and more efficient, but it does take some getting used to as far as how to use it. So if you're trying to open up a file from your computer, that's not the way Resolve works. You just open up Resolve, you've got a project library, um, and then in my viewer here, I have a couple different projects. So I'm going to create a new project. So I just go right here, click on new project. We can give it a name. My new short film. And I'm going to create that. So that creates a new project in my database within Resolve. And that is all I need to do to create that new project. It's here, it's ready to go. I'm now in the edit page. So if you haven't used Resolve before, there are a few different pages in the interface that I can see in the bottom here. I have a media page, I have a cut page, edit, fusion, color, fairlight, deliver. We're going to spend most of our time on the edit page, but with a little bit on probably the media page. We might touch the cut page just for a second, and then the deliver page. Um, for those of you who are new to it, but have used other editing apps, the edit page is probably the most familiar to you because you have a couple different viewers, a source viewer, you have a timeline viewer, you have your timeline itself over here, and you can access media here in the media pool. If you are coming from something like Final Cut Pro X, the cut page over here is actually a lot closer to what that experience is with a magnetic timeline and a couple other like a single viewer sort of setup. So that may be more familiar to you if you're coming from that. Well, David's wondering, does where you store your media matter? Like Premiere, where it can be stored anywhere, or is it all created in Resolve as it is in Avid? Yeah. So media is on it doesn't get moved when you import it into a project. You're actually just linking your media to a project when you import it. I'll do that momentarily. But basically, your media can be anywhere, ideally on a drive that is accessible and fast. We can talk about speed and things like that of your media if you want, but doesn't really matter where your media is. Resolve can access it from anywhere. Linda's wondering if you delete the media of a project, where do you find it on the desktop? So because it's stored the media is stored anywhere, if you delete it from the project, you're not actually deleting it in your project storage. How do you retrieve or upload your files to edit? So Resolve is going to access files, but it's not going to necessarily create or manage your files on your computer or on your external hard drive. So let me I'm going to click over here in the lower section on my media page. And this is where I tend to start a project. So in it, I have a window here for my media storage. This is a sort of like a Finder or Explorer window into my storage. It's not affecting the Resolve project itself. This is just where I start to find my media and bring it into my project. So I've got a external drive here that I will click on. Let me find a project. This is a previous short film of mine. So I'm just clicking in this media storage area. I've got a couple folders here. I'm going to ignore that, but I have footage. So this is, the footage that was shot. It's all organized by day of production. And this is something that I did beforehand. It's not related to Resolve, but I try to keep things fairly organized. When we're coming from set, take the card, put it into a day folder, and that helps me stay organized. You may have a different method of doing that, but I highly recommend putting everything in very easy to read folders. So I've got a footage folder, and then I have a sound folder, which is organized the same way, my production sound. When I start a project, there's a couple things that I like to do first, um, before I even import any media. So let's go over to, in the lower right here, there's this little gear icon. That is project settings. So you can change anything about the project, the way the project is set up, by going to that. It's something you don't need to access too much, but it's good to be familiar with, so you can control what is happening. I'm going to click on that. This project settings shows up, and I have a bunch of stuff that I can do. The main one you'll probably want to think about as you go is timeline resolution. Here we go. So this is the resolution of my project. It does not need to be the same as my footage, but it depends on what you want your output to be. So if I want my project to be 1920 by 1080 HD, I can choose that. I can also click on the dropdown and click from a bunch of other presets. I have DaVinci Resolve Studio, so I do have options here that are larger than Ultra HD. But let's say I want to export, I guess I should say your timeline resolution should match your intended deliverable. So what you want to export as. A lot of the time that may be Ultra HD 3840 by 2160 or 4K. But that is up to you depending on how you want to work.
And I'm sorry, that's
yeah, go ahead.
really because like if you do effects and they're not the same resolution of your final delivery, you're going to have problems.
Well,
A lot of effects like titles
yeah.
and things and whatever, they're not, if the resolution is not the same of the
Yes.
one that you have, that you're going to be delivering, your footage. But the problem is that which one is the problem that I take in this class is like, it's so stuttering. I really cannot figure out a way to have a smooth playback. And that's why I need to, this is very important for me that what you're talking about this, to make sure that they are able to work properly on.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that will affect that. One is your timeline resolution, because that is what Resolve is using as the playback settings, essentially. If you have a rather underpowered computer or old computer, that kind of a thing, you can do a lower resolution to work in. So if I'm going to export in Ultra HD, I could choose 1920 by 1080, which is exactly 1/4 of the number of pixels. Work in there because there will be less resolution that Resolve is working in. And then before I export, I go back to 3840 by 2160. That may affect the quality of some things as you work, but then you will reference the original media once you render. The other thing
The
that
title,
does,
effects, and all the stuff, and all the graphics is going to be
yes,
all thrown out. It's going to be all whacked.
they shouldn't be if all your compositions are using the exact same aspect ratio. So if I add a title and I'm working in an HD timeline, once I switch back to here, it should work fine. Resolve is resolution independent, so it's creating its graphics. It's rendering it on the screen at a certain resolution, but then if I change my timeline format, it will change how it's rendering. That is not the case if you render something out beforehand. So if I do an effect and I render it out as 1080p, and then I put that into a 4K timeline, then you're going to have lower quality. What I tend to do is work at my desired resolution for export. So let's do that now here. I'll save that, and then I'll go through some other optimization things a little bit later as we get into some timeline settings. But there's a lot that you can do, and there's a lot of different settings in various places that may help. Let's see. Haven't been able to retrieve files. How do I export them to the media section? All right, so yeah, Evangelina will get to that. So that is now importing files into the project. So I'm looking at files on my computer here. You should see your drives there. Obviously, they're going to be different than mine. All right. And oh, the other thing, sorry, let me get back to my settings.
Take a look.
Make sure to mute yourself if you are not intending to be talking right now. See the drives, but they won't open. Okay. Quick sidebar here. We'll go to, in my menu, DaVinci Resolve, Preferences. And this is the app preferences here in System and
Like weird
Media
little
Storage.
words in there? Yeah, I don't understand why.
Let's see. Um,
Should I call them? Oh no, these are payments you're making. It's like the $5.
Julie, your mic is on.
Oh, sorry.
All good. Yeah. Feel free. Anyone can chat whenever you want, just as long as it's intentional. All right. So I'm in my app settings, system, media storage, and right here, I have a list of the drives that Resolve has access to by default. Usually your internal drive will be connected there. Others you may want to add manually. So I can add a drive here and choose one, and it will be added to this list. And that will allow Resolve permissions. Although I think on Windows, you may need to do this manually. On Mac, it tends to work without doing that, I think. But most of the time, they just show up in the sidebar there for me without problem. But yeah, all right. So we're here, System. I went to DaVinci Resolve, Preferences, and now in my settings here, System, Media Storage, and then if you have another drive you want to add there, just click Add, and you can add that there. Now that I've opened a folder with a project in here, I've got, my files here. So I can actually just look through my media here and I can see here's an audio file. So I could scrub through if I wanted to here just to make sure, I know what these are, but I tend to do that after I've imported them into a project. So let me go back to this. The second thing that I'll do when setting things up is organizing my project. So I'll create bins here, which is a folder structure within the project. This is different than what's on my computer, or it can be different, and helps me stay organized. So I'll want a bin, which is a folder for my media or for my footage, for my sound, for a number of other things. The other thing is that timelines will be in there, and I like to keep those organized separately, and Resolve actually has a setting for that. If I go back to my project settings in the lower right corner, click on the gear icon, and I go to General Options. So I'm in Project Settings, I click on General, and I scroll down here. I don't know why it's under Color, but it is. General Options under the Color area here, and I click on Use Timelines Bin. I click on that, and I click Save, and now we can see here on the side, I have a new bin here. So I have a master bin and a timelines bin. So any timeline I create to work, on my editing will go into that bin. So that keeps it separate from my media. It helps me stay organized, and we'll see how that works in a little bit. Second thing, now we can actually get the media into the folders here. So I'm in master. I can right click on it, or I can right click in this bin area here and right click, create new bin. So I right click, create new bin, and creates a folder there. Let's call this footage. So I've got that. I could create another one. This time I'm just going to click on master and hit Shift Command N, or that's Shift Control N on Windows. And I'm going to type audio. And now I have two new bins. So I could, drag my footage from here. See if I open this, I can drag this from my media storage area into the media browser at the bottom here. And I'm getting a question. Change project frame rate. The selected clips have a different frame rate to the project. Would you like to change your timeline frame rate to match? So this basically, Resolve is telling me, hey, your footage has a different frame rate. Do you want the project frame rate to match that? In this case, most of the time I'm going to select yes, because if my settings are all consistent, then I'm going to want to do that so that the timeline frame rate is the same as my footage. Generally, you're going to want those to match. If you know a good reason not to do that, you can have those different. So I'm going to click Don't Change for just a minute, because this footage is actually different than the rest of my footage frame rate. So I can, as I select media here, there's this metadata area, and that will show me the properties of this media that I just imported. So I can see this is the file name of the file. This is where it is. I can see that it's a Blackmagic RAW. I can see the audio format, and I can see the frame rate, which here is 23.976. And then other clip details here. But I also know that the rest of my timeline is actually 24.0. The rest of my footage is 24.0 frames per second. So if I double click on this one, I can see that one is 24.0 frames per second. So that's the one that I want the setting that I want my project to be at. So if I go back to project settings, I can go to master settings, and my timeline frame rate is indeed 24. If you want to change that before the media is added, I can just click that drop down and select my setting. Catherine says, I keep getting pop-ups that I need to update my cache still in capture locations. Yes. Let's go over that real fast. So that is also a project manager or project settings thing. In order to get to project settings, I've been clicking on this gear icon. If you want to save a little bit of time and you like keep your keyboard shortcuts the way I do, I hit Shift 9 and that shows up. That is Shift 9. So now I'm in my project settings. If I scroll down, I have this setting, this area over here that is optimized media and render cache. And then working folders. So these are what controls the files that Resolve creates. We'll go over optimized media, I think, a little bit later, but working folders is the error you're running into, Catherine, is the cache files location. Probably the error is coming because whatever cache file location that is listed here is not currently connected or available. So you can click browse and you can choose something that is on your computer or an external drive that is always connected. These cache and gallery stills locations should be something that's always connected to your computer so you don't get that error. It doesn't matter too much where they are, but I like having it on a drive that is connected and very fast. All right, I've added this file to my project. I only have one piece of media in my project. I can scrub through, but this looks like it was just a test shot, so I don't want it. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to hit delete. Now, I have not deleted that file from my computer. As we talked about before, I have just deleted it from this project. Resolve is not affecting my media when it's in the project. I could delete it from my computer since this section right here, media storage, is actually the files on my computer. I can right click on it and delete permanently. I don't want to do that. I don't want to delete that file, but I could also right click on any file and click reveal in Finder. That will be a little bit different if you're on Windows, but now I can see here in my file system and just look at all these files on my computer that way, if you prefer. I know we've spent a lot of time on the media here. and we'll go through a little faster to the rest, but it is important to, bring your files in and get those to match. The way that I tend to do things, which speeds things up a little, is so I could, let's see, like drag all of these files from a folder into my media area right here. But because I have things organized in a way with these subfolders, I can preserve that folder structure if, let me delete these bins that I made earlier. So I'm just going to click on footage, and I'm going to drag it not into this area over here, but I'm going to drag it over to the left, over where it says master, and it will think for a little while. But what that's going to do is bring in a bin that matches the name of the folder that I just dragged over. Let me change the project rate. And it's going to also preserve the folder structure below that. So see, in this footage folder, I have day 1, day 2, day 3. Now I have a bin that's footage, and it has day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. In that. So when I'm working through a project, that tends to help me go through and keep things organized. So if I know, hey, we shot something on day 4, I have a pretty good idea of where to find it. I'm going to do the same thing with my audio folder. So I've got production sound here. I'm going to drag that over. Master. If I drag something over into this area right here, it will bring all of the files in, but it's going to completely disregard the folder structure. So if that's what you want and you just want all the files in the folder or in the bin that you've created, that's totally fine too. This is just how I tend to work, and I think it speeds me up just a bit. So now all of the sound is in there. So I have footage bin and a production sound bin, and then I have bins underneath that folders that matches my file structure. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple other bins just that helps me. I like to have bins to keep things fairly organized. So I usually will have one for footage. I'll have one for production sound. Sometimes depending on what the project is, I might create a stock one. So if I'm getting stock footage, I'll put it into a separate bin. I'll do GFX for graphics. So if I have stills, if I have titles from Photoshop or logos, things like that, I'll put that in a graphics bin. And right now I'm just hitting Shift Command N to create a new bin, or you can right click on the master bin right here and click new bin. And that adds a new one underneath. And what else? Music. I tend to put music there. Sometimes I will create a new one. I'll do temp. So it's things that are not going to be in the final project, but I'm using temporary. That may be temp music, maybe temp graphics, could be temp VO, anything that's not the final thing. And I keep that separate just because if I know I'm going to throw it out and I won't need that media at the end of the process, it just helps me stay organized. Your preferences may vary. Now,
so can you nest
yes.
One DaVinci Resolve project in another? Let's suppose you've got a short film, and now you want to take that short film and put it into a compilation of longer films.
Yep.
And the sequence and all that stuff.
Yeah, so that would be in timelines. You can have as many different timelines as you want. Other apps call that sequences or various other things, but that is how that goes. We'll talk about nesting things in a little bit as we're managing timelines, but that's totally possible. You can also export timelines from a project and like just that timeline and import that into another if it makes it easier to manage for you depending on what you're doing. Did that answer the question, or at least introduce that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we'll go over more of that later. All right, so question here. Let's see. Don't see the menu on the left. How do I see it? Couple points about our resolution here in Workspace. So right now, in every page of Resolve, there are some tabs at the top that will open various panels on screen. So right here, I see media storage and it's a brighter white as opposed to gray. So that means it's open. If I click it, I've just closed my media storage area. I have the metadata panel over here. And if I close that, and then I've got this audio one open, close that, that will toggle that. So if you're trying to open up something, that will be a good way to change things about your interface, depending on what you need to have open. The other thing is, with each page, there are different panels and different interfaces. So I'm on the media page right now, which is why I have this right here. If you're just seeing this area, just the media pool itself and not bins, there should be this icon. This is kind of small, but there's this all the way on the left side. Opens and closes this sidebar so I can see my bins. All right, before we get into the actual editing, something that is often important to do is syncing sound. How do we do that? Well, Resolve fortunately makes it pretty easy. Let's say I want to go to day 1. I've got a bunch of media here. Actually, there's no dialogue on that day. Let's go to day 3. I can see a bunch of media here. I can see some stuff happening. There's definitely talking going on. And if I go over here to my day 3 in audio, you can see I'm fairly organized with my bins, so it's easy to go between those. I can see all my audio files. And I can see a lot of these have multiple tracks. So there is a lav, 3 lavs, there was a boom, and then the mix that came out of the sound recorder. So a bunch of different tracks. So I see each of these right here. Now, to sync these tracks, I can do a couple things. Let's say I want to do day 3, and what I'm going to do is I want to see all the video files and all of the audio files at the same time from this day. So I'm going to click on day 3 bin under video, and I'm going to command click on day 3 under audio. And now I have both of these selected at the same time. And now I have all day 3 media files selected. Now, what you can do is choose, this file, and that has, choose this file, and then choose your video file, right click on them, and then click auto sync audio. So you choose audio file and a video file and select right click, select auto sync audio. What that's going to do is bring up a tool here that says, how do you want to sync? Do I want to synchronize using waveform or timecode? So waveform will just read the on-camera audio of this video file. If there's a timecode track that was used on set, you synced with a smart slate or some other timecode sync tool, you'll have that. If you have onboard camera audio, as well as your separate audio file, you can select waveform, and then it will use a channel number. You can select which channel it's going to reference. Automatic tends to work fairly well. And then if you select retain embedded audio, that will keep the audio that's attached to the video and also attach this audio track below that. So you'll have all audio tracks to work with. If you don't want to do that, you can keep this unchecked, and then you can, it will get rid of the onboard camera audio. Well, it's not going to delete it. It's just not going to have that available for you in the edit page. Was there a question?
Actually, yes.
Yep.
Once you've done the sync, you're gonna have like all those tracks. Is there an automatic way to just compound everything on one track? Because if I wanna edit the dialogue, I don't want to have like 15 tracks. So we just want to have like one track, like a compound of all the tracks, to do it automatically instead of like putting on the timeline and make a nest sequence of that. Is there any way to do it automatically?
Yeah, so you can actually sync audio after you've edited. as one option. It's a little bit more of a pain sometimes, but it's definitely possible. You can also choose which tracks are available. So let's do that. I'm going to actually highlight everything because I don't need to sync one clip at a time. I can right click as all of these are selected, and I hit Command A to highlight them all, or Control A on Windows. I'm going to right click. I'm going to click Auto Sync Audio. And these ones have a time code track, so I'm going to use that. And I click Sync. And it's done. How do I know? I'm going to click on this file right here. Click on Inspector. Let's close the metadata. All right, so I have this file that's selected. I'm going to click on File over here. And now I can see the tracks, the audio tracks that are available to this clip. Before, there was just this track. Guess I can undo everything to prove that to you, but for time's sake, you'll just take my word for it that the selected audio track added these 5 tracks, and then this one is the camera audio. I can select my audio configuration here for how I want to do that. I tend to leave that as default, but once that sync is done, if I go over to my edit page and I just take one of these clips and I drag it into my timeline, you can see that it's brought in all of these audio tracks. So we've got a lot of that. One thing you can do if you don't want to listen to all these all the time is just mute these tracks. You can disable
No
it.
question of listen, it's question of like, I really don't want to get all my real estate, my audio real estate.
Yeah.
That I just want to have like one track, and then the sound department is going to relink and do all the post.
Yes. One possible way is, let's see, can I do this for everything? Because all of these are from the same setup, I can just, I'm on the edit page now, but I'm still in the same media. This media pool is the same as it was here. I can right click on these clip attributes, and I'm editing all of these clips at the same time. So what I have access to here on the audio tab of this clip attributes thing is all of the channels that are attached here. So I can add tracks here, I can remove tracks here, and I can say I just want to work from the mix, like the mix that is from the audio from the audio recorder. It tends to mix all of the tracks together and have a left and right one. What I could do is just change this format to stereo, have mix left and then mix right, and then delete these other tracks here. So I have one stereo track. I'm gonna hit OK. And now once I go back to the edit page and I drag something in here, I now have one track that is a stereo mix, and I can edit from there. But all
it
of
will
that,
retain the time code. It will retain the time code for the
exactly.
post.
All of that is still linked. So, if you're sending that off to someone else for sound, the time code is all going to be the same. You can even have everything
and you can
synced.
read the burn-in. It would read the burn-in of the sound. If I can burn-in of the soundtrack, of the audio track, it will read the time code of the audio track.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So it's totally up to you. There's a lot of different options for how to do that or what you want to do. I will tend to have, actually, I think it depends on the project, but sometimes I'll keep a lot of the tracks there, but I will mute them. But again, it depends on your workflow and your preference and sometimes the project for how you want to do that.
Can you switch on that track? Can you just switch which track you're listening?
So let me click on a file again. I'm on my media pool. I'm going to click clip attributes, and you can see I have my source channel drop down here. So I can, even with the clip in my timeline, I can just change that. So I actually want it to be the boom on the left and then one of these lavs for the right, or I can totally just change this to mono, and I only want to use the boom now, and then I hit OK.
But that would change the entire clip. But let's say that you're on a timeline and you got like your piece of that sequence of that clip. So
Yep.
you just want to in the timeline, you just want to listen to that part. You want to listen to the mic of like, you know, Orlando, whatever. And
Right.
so you can do it on the timeline for just a particular thing. Doesn't mean that it's going to change for the entire clip, that when you take it again, it will reflect that. Can you just change it only on the timeline?
Yeah. So if I click clip attributes here,
Yeah.
and this isn't in the media pool, but on the timeline itself,
Right.
and then I can go to clip attributes. Let me say,
Right.
let me make this mono. Let's do that. And then that will change it. It's hard to see in here, but that did change in here.
Right. And it's not going to be like next time that I take that clip again, it's not going to just give me Niccolo, it's going to give me the mix that I did it originally, correct?
That's a good question. I believe that's per clip, yes. So I just dragged the same clip here.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
the instance of the timeline. So if I go to clip attributes for this,
Excellent.
this one's just mono, and then this one, same
You
clip.
won't disturb the original clip.
Yes, correct. So when you change the clip settings within the timeline that is unique to the clip in the timeline, if you change it in the media pool, that will change
Right.
it in the media pool, and then those settings will carry over if you drag it into the timeline.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's going to be the same thing when you import the media, you know, in the media, you can just put your LUT because I see that you had some log footage. But what about if it's not just the LUT that I want to change to my entire thing? I want to do a special color correction. Like, for example, I want to do all black and white. And so would I be able to do it in the media, when import the media, because I want to do it to the entire thing instead of doing one by one? Would you be able also to do some modification on the entire media from the media pool?
Yes.
Like the same for everybody.
Yep. So there's a number of ways to do that. Let's go over color management while we're here, because there's a number of ways to do that, and it will depend on your project. But we can see here, I'm looking. This is all log footage, so it's looking washed out. I can manage this in a number of ways. Number one is I can do project color management. So let me just put this in my timeline so we can see some things that are happening. I'm going to hit Shift 9, or I can go to the gear icon in the lower right, and I'm going to go to color management here. So one way, and this is the easiest way to just, if you have a single camera setup or you're using raw footage, I go to color science, I change this to DaVinci YRGB color managed. I can leave everything as automatic and just choose my output color space, the default standard definition Rec 709, and I click save. And suddenly I'm looking at my normalized Rec 709 footage. Because this is Blackmagic Raw, Resolve knows what it is and how to transform it. I haven't really had to do anything, so I can see everything that is done. And now my timeline looks correct. This is the way I want to see these colors generally. Quick note on log footage, I recommend color managing or using a LUT or something just for the purpose of editing. You can then undo that when you're going into doing final color grading. I don't think anyone should ever have to look at log footage. It's not a it's not a format that's intended to be viewed that way. The camera encodes that way for a specific reason, but that is not something you should ever be looking at. That is my little soapbox on that. The end.
A bit more of a basic question.
Yeah.
So if I'm seeing you have your footage and you're seeing a timeline. I took my footage and I drag it into either the source side or the timeline area, and I see no clip or nothing, and the name of the footage is red on the top. But if I scroll through the footage in the bin, I can see it's moving and that kind of stuff. And when I play it in the source side, I can hear. It's just I don't see any picture. I don't see any indication of a clip or anything.
Sorry, where was that?
In other words, so see, you've got your footage on your screen, you've got your footage on your left side in a bin.
Yes.
drag the clip into this when you were originally checking to see how many audio tracks, whatever, you drag it into either the source side or their timeline.
Yep.
And you have a bunch of clips showing up right now on your timeline. You're seeing audio and video, and
Yes.
you see in the source and the record side.
Mhm.
So the question is, if you're not seeing, if you take a piece of footage from the bin and you drag it into your source side, and
Yeah.
you don't see any picture, but you can, when you hit play, you can hear it playing, and you see the name of your thing is also red on the top, so I can see
Yep.
there's. And then if I try and even drag that in to the timeline from there, you literally shouldn't that should literally drop a whole clip into the timeline. If you're not
Yes.
anything in the timeline either, what does that mean? In other words, there's a clip in there, but it won't play or won't play picture.
So it won't play picture. Like if I drag this into my timeline, you're not getting any playing.
And even in the source side, we're not even seeing the clip, but I see the name is there. So in yours, you've got on the top, see the red on the top, you've got a name.
Yeah.
But if below that, there's no image.
Are you looking, and you're looking at a video file?
I'm looking at a video file and I'm in the edit mode. When I go into the cut thing on the bottom, I do see the clip in there and everything.
Interesting.
Share your screen. Share your screen. So
Yeah, I'm
he
not.
can-
I think
No.
it might be a troubleshooting thing, so I don't know that we'll have time to really go through that, but feel free to message me after that and we can talk through it.
Okay.
All right, let's go through a couple other things. There's way too much that we could talk about with color, so we're not going to go over that in too much detail. But to answer the question from before, you can also, in addition to doing color managed, you can actually do that on a per clip basis if you have different cameras that you want to do a temporary thing where I can right click on here or a number of clips. I can choose a LUT, and then I can choose from the ones available here or add those in. Again, we can go over that in detail on a color workshop, but I can choose a LUT to apply to those clips so I can normalize it for the purpose of editing. And I can do that for just these clips, and then I can do a different one for the rest of the clips. All right, let's see. We've got media. We talked about syncing. Let's talk about, what's the other thing? Oh yeah. So let's do a little bit about metadata. So organizing footage, the more time you spend on that, the easier it is to find things later. Let's go back to my media page here, and I've got all this footage right here. And let's say I want to organize this. I'll go here. So I've got a bunch of footage here. I'm going to highlight this top row. And this is all scene 5. It was shot on day 3 here, but it's all scene 5. And I want to change that in my metadata here so I can easily access it later. So I've got in my inspector, I've got metadata. If you're not seeing that, you can change the view here. But I have this section for scene. I'm just going to put 5. And because all of these are highlighted, I have just affected all of those clips. If I click on any one of them, I can now see that this is scene 5. Now, let's see, I've got these over here. That's a different scene. Let's say this one over here is, what scene is that? These are a couple different scenes. I'm going to manage these, and that is scene 3. And now, so all these are in one bin, but there's a couple different scenes in them. And as I'm editing, I'm going to want to edit scene 5 and only see things from there. So I have what's called smart bins in this view over here. And smart bins are just it's a saved search, essentially. It's not the same as a bin in here, but it's a quick way where I can reference my media and take a look at it and find the clips I want. Let's actually work on the edit page for the rest of this, just because you're probably going to be spending more time in there, and I have it all there. So I have my entire media pool right over here in the edit page next to the rest of my tools. If you don't see smart bins, there's this 3-dot menu. In general, like almost every panel in Resolve has this 3-dot menu that has other features. So if you ever want to explore of what can be done, these are good menus to explore. But this particular one on the media pool panel has a show smart bins checkbox. So make sure that is checked if you want to see it. And I'm in here. I'm going to right click and in this smart bin area, add smart bin. I'm going to call this scene 5. Now, what I want to do is change these parameters to find scene 5. So I'm matching all of these parameters, metadata, I chose shot and scene, and I want scene to, like, scene is 5. And you can already see that it's found those in here. I'm going to click create. And now I have a new smart bin over here. If I click that, now I have all my footage from scene 5. So as I start to get to the editing of that scene, all that footage that is tagged with scene 5 is there. That way I don't have to go in here and start hunting for, that's scene 5. That's not scene 5. If I'm editing scene 5, there it is. Now, as you get into editing, there's a couple different methods of how to do your selects and do your dailies. I'd love to actually hear in the chat if you have a preferred method of how you're doing that now, as far as like how you're selecting your shots. There's a couple different ways to do that, so we can go over that. But in general, we're getting our footage, which is in our media pool. If I double click on one, I see it in my source viewer. So I'm just looking at what's here in the media pool. And then when things are in the timeline, I will see it on the right over here. One common way to go through is I can choose, I click on it, I find where I want to start. I can hit I for in on my keyboard. I can go until the end here and hit out, or O for out. And then I can drag that from there into my timeline. And now I have just that section in my timeline. Let me zoom out of my timeline using this handy dandy timeline zoom tool. And now I can see that clip on my timeline. I can easily grab the handles here to shorten or lengthen the clip. And you can see that there's this white outline that shows the extent of like how far I can go to. I can drag this out all the way back to the full media clip if I wanted to. Hit Command Z to undo. Something that I like to do, let me just go out of that, is when I'm choosing selects, I actually tend to just drag everything and put all of those clips in a timeline. And then I will review footage from here. So I can play through this whole timeline with all my clips and watch through in my timeline. And then what I can do is you can cut clips, you can mark clips. So there are markers. You can use these for editing. You can use it for marking parts of your clip that you like. There's a lot of different options here, but I just want to kind of take you through what some of those might be. So let's say I'm playing through and I get to here. I'm like, that's a nice moment. I can hit this marker button. And that adds this marker right there above my timeline. I can double click it, name on it. This is funny. And then if ever I need to come back to that moment, I can go back here. My playhead will snap to it and I can click on it and see what I wrote. You can also, what I tend to do, and this may be not how you like to work, but this is an art, not a science, is I sometimes will cut a clip over here and just get to the moment I like, and then I'll move that section onto the next track, and I hit Option up to move that to the next track. And then what I'll end up doing is once I've done that a number of times, is I will highlight everything on this track 2 or maybe even a track 3, and then I'll just copy that and paste it into another timeline and delete the spaces. And then I only have the really good stuff, and then I'll start editing a scene from there. So that means I'm using multiple timelines to organize my footage. You don't need to have one timeline and that's your timeline. You can have multiple timelines for different purposes. So I will often have one timeline for my selects where I'm doing this process, and then another timeline for scene 5 assembly where I assemble the scene and start to edit in there. And then later on, I will have a timeline for every scene, and then I'll eventually take all of those timelines and put into one full timeline for the whole project. If a project is over 5 minutes, I will tend to work that way, or at least over 5 minutes and it has multiple scenes. If it's short, you tend to not actually need to do that. How do you mark the actual clip? Because if you're cutting clips, the timeline marker will not be in the same spot. Correct. Yeah. So we saw when I added a marker before, I'm going to hit M on the keyboard and that adds a marker here. And you see that's adding this to the timeline. If I move that clip, I don't actually know what that marker is doing anymore. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. The way I can mark a specific point on a specific clip is just having the clip selected. So I see this red outline on the clip. Now, if I hit M, you can see that there is this marker that is both on the audio and video. So it's that exact point of the clip. My playhead will snap to that if I want. And if I start moving this clip around, that is still there on that part of the clip. Yeah, so as you're going through, that is a good way to note parts of clip that you like or that need attention or anything else like that. You can add markers to clips in the media pool as well. So I could be reviewing my footage, for example, and I say, well, there's some good spots in there. So you can sort of see, I know it's small, there are markers on the timeline there. And then if I take that clip and then drag it into my timeline here, those markers are still there. So you could add markers while you're reviewing footage here in the media pool before you ever add it to the timeline. How you use markers is up to you, but it is a flexible way of notating things. All right, couple tips of kind of what I'm doing to navigate around, because you've seen me make some cuts here to drag these up. And also I'm zooming in and out of the timeline a lot. I do this all the time where I'm, zooming out, I'm zooming in, I'm going to a spot, zooming out again. I'm doing that because I have a 3-button mouse. So I'm using this Logitech MX Master 3. It's got a scroll wheel on it, and I like it a lot. And I hit Option and my scroll wheel, and I can zoom in and out of the timeline. So I can get exactly where I need to go. So I can see my full timeline, and then I can zoom in. I hover over the mouse where I want to zoom in on. I hold Option and the scroll wheel, and then I can zoom out the same way. Or I can change the toggle of that by hitting Shift Z. So if I'm zoomed in a lot, I hit Shift Z and I get out of there and I can see my whole timeline again. You can also use this timeline zoom tool to navigate the size of what you're seeing in your timeline. All right. Another quick way of reviewing footage while we're here. I mentioned the cut page before. I'm going to click at the bottom here to go to the cut page. And this is a cool feature. One of the few things I like. One of the few things I use on the cut page. Cut page has a lot of great tools. I just don't use it that much. But I do use this one. So if I'm in my media pool, I'm in this footage, this folder right here. So you need to have a folder or a bin selected. And then I'm going to select this second icon right here. This is source tape. When I click it, it shows me in my viewer here all of the clips in the bin I have open. And you can see there's a line here denotating boundaries of each clip. So this is the equivalent of putting all your clips in that bin into one timeline without ever having to actually do that. So I can just click here and watch through this entire bin, which is not a bad way to review your footage. You can go through that whole bin. I even have this what's it called? Fast review. Yeah, fast review. Um, and if I click on that, this is a great way to go through a whole bin of B-roll, for example. If I click fast review, it's going to speed through the clips. And the longer a clip is, the faster it will play. If the clip is short, it will spend a little bit more time playing that clip, but this lets you get through a timeline fast. And obviously you can't listen to the dialogue and see the acting in this case, but you can quickly look through a bin in fast motion and see what you've got. So I tend to use this fast review feature if there's a lot of B-roll or montage type footage. This helps me just go, okay, yeah, that's that shot, or we have that shot of that insert, things like that. But this is a fun way to review footage, even just regular going through this whole bin, and then I can review my whole scene that way. Any questions on any of this stuff so far? I'll get into a lot more editing and timeline tips, but if you have questions about reviewing footage, making selects, markers, any of the things I've shown, let me know. Put it into the chat or unmute yourself and say hi. No questions. All right. Moving right along. So we've got a timeline. We have some clips in it. Let me show you some features we have to organize this and edit as we go. So I'm going to close the media pool right here. I don't need that right now. Couple different options I have for organizing my timeline and working within it. So first, working in the timeline as you're editing clips, I'm going to hit Option, Option and scroll with my mouse. Every clip, as I get to the end of it, my cursor has changed. So it's a pointer until I get to the edge here, and I have now selected an edit point, or it's over an edit point. So now I can start to drag these handles in and out if I want to edit my clip. You can see that currently the edit point is red, which means that there's no more footage that way, so I can't extend it further. But I can bring it in and out, and I can do the same thing just on the other side. And then to drag a clip around, I can just click and drag. I can also drag it up and down on different tracks. And you'll notice that I've created a bunch of blank space here. I can deal with that by either clicking on it and hitting delete, or I can do edits where instead of creating this empty space, I ripple the timeline. This is sort of a magnetic timeline situation where I'm going to click on this second button right here. This is trim edit mode. So I was here on pointer mode and I click here for trim edit mode. I can also get there by hitting T on my keyboard. And now my cursor is a little different. So when I get to the edge here, if I click and drag it in, rather than creating empty space, it's actually bringing in the rest of the timeline. So I don't create any gaps. And extending it further, that will push all of the clips after it. If I zoom out a little, you can see.
Can you do it like frame instead of like dragging, but like move things frame, like frame?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways to do that. You can just zoom in a lot on the timeline to do that. I can also double click on the edit point, and now I have frame accurate points in my viewer itself.
Without doing it without dragging, like like on Avid, you enter 3 frames, or you enter 4 frames, or you enter whatever, instead of dragging.
Right. That is a good question. I don't remember off the top of my hand I know it's possible. I can, change the duration of a clip and do that. I can type, 3 frames in the timeline there. I think that's how I would do it. Clicking on the clip, clicking on my time code thing right here, +3 will move the clip by 3 frames.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the
What do you mean that?
the actual cut, not moving the thing, just moving the cut.
Right. Yep, that works the same. So I just need to have the transition point, the cut point selected. So just double click on that.
Okay, so you select whatever you see that you want to change. So it's a
Correct.
-3 +3, and that would change. Okay, the position or the transition.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Cool. Lean is asking, is there a place where I can learn about frame rates and formats? Editing teasers for social and YouTube would like to educate myself on what these formats mean. Yes. I tend to reference things like that at the University of YouTube. You could probably do it's harder when you don't know exactly what you're looking for, but if you look for an overview of frame rates or formats, that may give you a place to start. Sometimes it's easier to find something like I specifically want to know about a particular format, like what is a .mov container or something like that. But I think there are probably some good channels out there. I don't know any off the top of my head to point to, so maybe some other people in the chat can recommend some. But yeah, YouTube tends to have a lot of good explainer videos. You may need to wade through a few bad ones to find a good one, but there's definitely some good resources out there. All right, let's talk a little bit about playback here. So if I'm playing through, as I edit, sometimes I'll play back pretty fast. And because I have a decently beefy computer, I'm not really running into any playback issues, but you might. And I definitely do if I'm overloaded with effects and things like that. So let's talk about how to improve our playback. Bunch of different settings to go through. So on my playback settings right here, playback menu, you can go to timeline proxy resolution. This is not the same as creating proxy files. This is specifically about how Resolve is playing back in this viewer. And by default, it is playing back and rendering all of the pixels that I have set up in my project. So it's a 3840 by 2160. If I change the timeline proxy resolution, and I go to half, it's only going to play back half of those pixels. If I go to quarter, it's going to play back a quarter of those pixels. If I zoom in a lot, you can see a quality difference. So let me play back, go to full. There is a change. I don't know if you can see that over zoom, but for me, it's dramatic. But again, I'm zoomed in quite a lot. For the purpose of editing, especially early on in the process, I may do that where I have that lower quality here in the viewer, but that means I have no dropped frames. It means I can play back as fast and as responsively as suits me. I don't like any lag. I'm, I tend to like to edit as fast as possible. I don't want my playback to be a bottleneck. So that is one way to go about that. If you're working with something like color, titles, effects, transitions, things like that, there will be things that need to be rendered. So let me show that off. Ignore what I'm doing right now because this is not a Fusion class, but I am adding a blur to this clip. So you can see now it's blurry. This takes some rendering power. If I'm doing things like that, and that this is the same for titles, transitions, and any other effects I might add. But if I want that to be rendered or pre-rendered, there's a cache feature in Resolve. So I have this render cache right here. And if I turn that on to smart, that will guess at what needs to be pre-rendered in my timeline so that I get fast playback. And you can see now there's this red line that's going across all of my footage slowly, and it's identifying what needs to be rendered. And as it turns blue, it is creating a cache of all of these files. So it's creating another format that is smaller and easier to play back. And it's applying to whatever it thinks it needs to cache. For something like a ProRes file, it's probably not going to do that because this is raw media. It is doing some of that. And there's also some color applied with my color management, so it's doing that for everything. So if I go back to my beginning and I play through, it's playing now the cached version of this. So as long as I'm not creating different effects or different color effects, I'm just editing, then that cache won't really need to change. I tend to use this later on in the process when I'm actually using effects, not so much in the editing point. But if you do run into performance issues, that is a good thing to turn on. To affect the format of that, let's hit Shift 9, getting into my master settings here, optimize media and render cache. That is this area right here under master settings, and I can select what the format of that is. So currently render cache format is ProRes 422 HQ, which is easier to play back than the raw media, but I could have that as a smaller file size if I want. So I could do that.
Which one of those proxy will carry an alpha channel?
So none of them except ProRes 444, XQ and 444, and also DNX 444.
I see.
Yeah, so most of these are not really for like most ProRes are intermediate formats that don't support an alpha channel. So I would use for that, I would probably render it out as an EXR or something like that, or something, use a different process if I'm using graphics. But for footage itself, I tend to use like a ProRes proxy or a ProRes LT that are fairly small files, easy to play back.
So, but if I have like a chroma key things, I would do a 444.
Well, if you are,
if I have, I need to carry an alpha channel for something.
Yeah, well, if you're creating an alpha channel from it, then the alpha channel doesn't need to be in the footage itself. So if I'm, for example, I created a ProRes 422 of this and I key out the sky, I'm not saving the alpha channel in the original media or in the proxy file or in the cache. Like the cache is always going to be the rendered pixels of what the final result is and not the intermediate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I can still like I can have a ProRes thing here. I can key this out and the whatever the final result is going to show up as the ProRes, but the alpha channel itself is going to be in Fusion. I can render that out as an intermediate if I wanted to as an EXR, but you generally won't need to. So yeah, only if you want to have that alpha channel available as a separate file, which is less of a cache thing. All right,
yeah, when you like have to reduce somehow the size because things are stuttering. But yeah, no, I got the message. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool.
By the way, are you going to have in the future classes about fusion and color?
I think so.
Great.
Feel free to reply to the Blackmagic Collective emails, info@Blackmagic Collective, and let them know that you want those classes. Any of these topics I will happily chat about all day. And I know a lot of people are coming to Resolve specifically for color. We did one of those last year, so it would be fun to do again. There's definitely an endless supply of things to talk about with color. And of course, VFX and anything else. All right, what else? Oh yeah, and as far as playback, the other important thing that I think is worth talking about is actual proxy files. These are lower quality, easier to playback files for the purpose of editing. And Resolve has a pretty great system of using and generating proxies with that. So let me go back, Shift 9 on my project settings. And I have these options here. So proxy media resolution and proxy media format. So if I'm working with 4K media, I might want to go half that for my proxies just so they're smaller files and easier to play back. If you're doing a lot of punching in on your, zooming in, digital zooms on your media, then you might want to go with original or just not as small. But if I have pretty big files, I can just do half and then let's say ProRes 422 proxy, just so it's a smaller file. And then also here, proxy generation location, I select where those files will generate. So that can be on ideally a very fast drive.
How do you delete them after you finished editing in order to free some space?
So depends on where you store them. By default, if you store them in a separate folder entirely, you can just go to that proxy folder and delete it manually. That is the easiest way to manage, I think. But
so it goes those automatically they go to a separate folder. Those proxy they go to a separate folder.
It's going to be what you set. So I can set these to proxy generation location, and set that here.
You create that
and hit
proxy
save.
media folder. You create.
So it creates a folder for the project in that place you specify, but there's also other options. So if I hit Command comma to get to my Resolve preferences. There are other settings for that here. So I DaVinci Resolve preferences, and now under media storage. So there's a proxy generation location setting here as well, where it will currently it's set. If I select this option number 2, it's going to use the project setting, which is what I just did in my project settings. I can also set it to proxy subfolders in media file location. So for every folder, every folder of media on my drive, it will create a folder of the proxies within that folder. So if you have day 1, it will create a proxy subfolder in there. This makes it harder to delete after because then you have to go into each subfolder, but it's also easy for Resolve to keep track of.
And
I can also just
appear on the bins. How does it appear on the bins? How do you know that you're working with a proxy file and not the original?
I will show you. And then the other option here is ask when creating. So when I create the proxies, it asks me where to store those. So I'll just use the project setting for now because I already specified in there. I'll click save. And let me go to my media pool. We're working in this folder for now. Let's take a couple files right here. Actually, let me just delete this and start over. All right, so we have these files right here. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. I'm going to right click and I am going to find this option, generate proxy media. So it's going to generate proxies. Oh, hang on. Let me turn off my render cache for a second. All right, so I've selected these. I right click and I click generate proxy media, and it's re-encoding those files from, and these are originally Blackmagic raw. So now it's re-encoding them into the ProRes 422 proxy, I believe we specified, in the location that we specified. Now, each of these has a little icon on them that says HQ on them because
the proxy were HQ, right?
well, it's actually because the proxies are not currently being used. I have a setting right here in my viewer that says HQ. And if I click on that, I can select to disable all proxies or prefer proxies or prefer camera originals. Now, if I want to be playing back mostly from my proxies whenever possible, I'm going to click prefer proxies. And now we can see these files right here. The icon now says PXY for proxy. And if I go to those files in my timeline, I see a little icon here that has that same PXY. So that means these files both have a proxy and it is using that proxy. Because this is anamorphic footage and it's not automatically dealing with them properly, you can see that
The proxy
my
have
yeah,
whatever
so
that you choose. Yes.
I just need to tell them with raw, it's going to do that automatically. So for these, I need to select click attributes and then select my pixel aspect ratio to be correct. And oops. It's not what I wanted. Oh, you know what? What I should have done was set that before I generated the proxies.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like
Yeah.
whatever information you gave when you created the proxy, that's what it's going to create.
Exactly. So it has yeah, so if you're dealing with anamorphic footage, since we're talking about it, you can right click, clip attributes, and you can select the pixel aspect ratio for that clip. And it will try to identify automatically in some cases. In other cases, you can just define it based on the presets here, or click custom and then type in a number. But that is generating proxies. I will tend to do this as something fairly early on. So, and you can do this from the media page as well. So I can just highlight, oops, it's thinking. But if I, hit shift and then select all these files here, I can hit Command A and just select everything, right click, generate proxy media. Once I have all my other settings correct. And it will just generate. And usually once I've imported and set up a project and done all that, especially if it's a big one, I can right click, generate proxy media, and then just take a nap, go make lunch. Because it will take a while to generate those. It's re-encoding everything. But once all of that is done and you're in the editing process, your playback is generally going to be much, much, much smoother, especially if you're working with large media, if you're working with raw media, if large resolution, large file sizes, raw, and or you have a older or less powerful computer. Even if you do have a powerful computer, that still doesn't mean that you don't need proxies, because as you get faster with editing, the more dropped frames or, subpar playback you have, the more it may annoy you, because you're only as fast as your bottlenecks, which are often the clip playback speed. So have a fast drive, have easy to playback media, helps a lot.
And then when you're ready to deliver, you just switch that little menu that you show in which plays the original, and therefore is going to relink to the original media, right?
So it's linked automatically. This proxy feature right here is actually just about what plays back in the timeline. If I have proxies turned on and then I go to deliver, it will reference the original media when it goes to deliver by default.
Excellent.
So I don't even need to, assuming I'm just editing and I edit from proxies, I just go to deliver, and it will do the right thing. I can, if I want, for like, let's say this is just for a preview, and I don't want to pull from my original media because it's raw and huge. If I actually want to pull from my proxies, then I can go here to advanced settings, and I can select this use proxy media checkbox, so I can do my delivery or my render from the proxies, which is going to speed up your render times by a lot if you're just encoding a preview.
Gotcha.
But yeah, for final deliverable, by default, it's referencing original media.
No matter what's online.
Exactly. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about some timeline management stuff as you're going through.
Don't forget to talk about subclips.
Oh yes. I don't know. Look, yeah, let's go into that next. I just wanted a couple other tips on here. For let's say, if you start dealing with things on multiple tracks, there may be things that you want to be affected and other things you don't want to be affected. So I have a number of tools here. So for example, I have this lock track feature. So now that track is locked. No matter what I do, no matter what I delete, nothing will ever affect this track. If I click on it, I can delete the audio because that track isn't locked and the audio and video is selected at the same time. But that video is not deleted because that track is locked. It cannot be affected. So if I want to lock that audio track as well, there we go. Now there's nothing I can do to that track. There's no chance of me messing up what I have done. I can mess up the other tracks, but I cannot do that. So that is a handy feature for all sorts of tasks you may be doing, especially if you're dealing with many tracks. And then, of course, as I'm playing with audio here, I have a solo feature. So if I only want to hear track one, let's say you've already added some music or sound effects, but I just want to hear my dialogue, I can click solo, and now only this track will play back, or any tracks that are soloed, or I can mute tracks to not play those tracks. And then if you're ever playing through and you forgot, or you don't know why you're not hearing something, double check your solo and mute settings so that those come back. Let's do subclips while we're here. All right, so subclips are a way of breaking down long clips into shorter sections so that you can deal with them in your media pool more easily. It's just another way of organizing. So let's go back to my handy dandy scene 5 over here, and let's just go back to my original media. So let's say I want to break down this clip there's a couple different lines that I want to break down into sections, into like treat them as separate clips. So I can click I on my keyboard here, and then this whole thing right there. And from there, so I've selected this. I could drag and drop just that as a small clip into my timeline, but I want to manage this in my media pool. So I'm going to right click on my timeline in here between the in and out points, and I'm going to create a subclip. And now it asks me for a name. So I can just have this full media name subclip, but let's just call it scene 5, line 1, just so we can spot it more easily. Click create. And now it has added a subclip here. So it creates it. It looks like it's a new clip in my timeline. It is not actually a new clip, but it treats it. It basically says, I took the in and out points that I selected. So if I double click it, it just plays back just that short section that I selected. So now I can drag that bit into my timeline, and it's just that.
Can you expand it?
I cannot. So it's just that clip. It is.
And if you want to go back to the original so you can expand it?
Yes. That is. No, I think I can at some point. Oh, yeah, there it is. So I right click on it, edit subclip, and then I can change my in and out points, and I can actually just click use full clip extents. And now it keeps my in and out point, but I have access to the whole clip. So now I can just drag that into here.
And you could create a subclip from the timeline too, right?
Well, sort of. It's not so much a subclip, but what I can do is if I have, just a section here.
Like just a section, right?
Yeah, so like if I just take that small section of a clip, I can put this clip into a bin, and it doesn't call it a subclip because it's actually it's not using the same feature, but it's sort of
Right.
it's effectively a subclip, but without being called that, if that makes sense.
What
So
about, yeah, but what about if he has a transition in the middle?
that is okay. So I can, because it's saving.
Right, let's say like the in point is before the transition and the out point is after the transition.
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, I want to get a subclip of those two of two things, both. So he has a transition in the middle. I want to get a subclip of that two clips.
Gotcha. Well, let's add a transition here. Let's do dissolve. There we go. All right, so let's see what happens. So I'm dragging, highlighting all this, and I drag it into my clip there, and nothing happens. Why? Because these are two different clips, and it will only keep one clip at a time. Like it wants a clip to use in the media pool. What I can do, however, is if I want to keep these as a unit, I can highlight it, right click, and I can create a new compound clip. So this is a sort of nesting feature.
Right, but it won't keep the transition. If you make a compound, there's going to be like a one clip where you don't see what the cut is. But if I want, there is a segment, there is a scene that I already cut that I want to preserve it. So it has a lot of cuts. It's not necessarily the transition I'm interested. Is like it's like it's a scene that I already cut that I want to preserve it. How do I take it and put it on separate? Say this is scene 5.
Yeah. So with that, you can actually use multiple timelines. So I've got timeline 1 right here. Let me rename this.
Well, not necessarily scene 5, but just a little segment. So I'm not making a brand new, I'm not creating a new cut. When I'm it's like there is like a piece that I like. There's a little sequence that I like that I want to take it because I'm gonna use it. I haven't decided where to use it yet. So right.
I mean, you can do that with the compound clip if you want and keep it in there and keep it in your media pool. I tend to use timelines for most of my management of those things. So if I, let's say I've done this and I have some things to work with here, but then I create a new timeline, and then maybe this is like, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily do that, but we'll just call it Act 1, so it's called something else. And I'm, I've done some other things here and put those things in a timeline. I can take my scene 5 timeline and I can just drag that whole timeline in here. And then I could leave it like that and it treats it like a clip, or I can right click and decompose in place.
Oh, okay.
And now I have that exact edit here as its individual clips in its individual parts.
Okay, gotcha.
And you could, of course, if you did a compound clip, so let's just call, that compound clip, and if I move that, that added it somewhere into, where did it add that compound clip? There it is. Okay. So if I take that compound clip and I drag it in here, it is still its pieces because I can decompose that as well.
So basically, you take it from the timeline, you put it in a bag, put it in the closet, and then take it out of the closet and take it out of the bag.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
I like that. Yeah, so you're just putting these into a bag, and that is one thing that I like. I try to keep things as modular as possible, so I will, as I go, I will have a different timeline for each scene. Actually, I have a timeline where I do my selects, and then, I have an assembly for each scene. And then once I have all of the scenes together, then I will, or scenes edited separately, I'll create a full blank timeline and I'll add each scene into here. and then I'll right click, decompose them, and now I have my whole timeline as I want it, all of the scenes together. Now I can watch through and see how does the whole thing flow, and then continue my editing from there. As any of you start to work with longer and longer projects, I highly recommend getting in the habit of doing that, because if you are working on even a 20-minute short film that is like all in one timeline as you're like getting started with the assembly, it can be a lot, especially if you have a lot of coverage, or just a complex edit. The more you can break things down into bite-sized pieces, the better. I'm going through here and deleting these empty spaces. There is a faster way to do that. It's called delete gaps, and I don't necessarily remember where it is, so I can click on the help menu. I just type in if I know the name of what I want to find, and here it is, delete gaps. And there it is under edit, delete gaps. All right, so I found it, edit, delete gaps. And what that does is it takes out all the blank space between my clips. And there we go. Now I have no more.
Of every single track? What about if you have like three different video tracks? Does it do it on all of them and messing up the sync?
Let's find out. Let's create a few more gaps. Oops. There we go. Delete gaps. Nope. Looked like it deleted gaps across tracks.
Okay.
There we go.
Also, in the timeline window,
Mhm.
you have like different. There is that little icon, bottom left in the timeline, the window, the picture window. That you have transform, crop, dynamic.
Yes.
Exactly. Now, if I go, for example, to annotation, and then I want to go back to transform, I'm left with that graphic on top of it that I cannot get rid of it. It's like go back to transform. Let's say that you want to go back to the very top one. They say,
Yep.
now you got that. How do I get away from having that graphic on top of my of the thing? Because once I move that, there is no way for me to go back in a view, in a mode that doesn't have the graphic on top of it.
Yeah, so there's this under the 3-dot menu settings, there's a show marker overlays.
Yes.
And the marker includes both a a marker in the timeline, because
Right.
I see marker 1 over here, and any markings I have done with annotations. So I just unselect that here.
Oh, let me see, where is it? Reset, removal, video effect, removal, reset.
So yep, the 3-dot menu.
Yeah, it's
above.
because I have 18.6 is like
Okay.
video, removal, video effect, removal, audio effect, removal, and reset all. But I just want to get away I don't want to see those lines.
Right.
Because so I don't, because there is no, after you go there is no way to go back to any version that is not highlighted. So like, yeah, so you go back.
So you just need to turn off so you can get out of
Yeah, I want to get
there.
out. Yeah, I
But
want to
then
get.
also you can turn off this menu over here. So like if I have annotations on, just click on the annotations icon and then
Oh, okay.
uncheck show marker overlay.
Oh, I
That will be
gotcha.
gone.
There
Yeah.
you go. There you go. You just click on the icon itself in order to.
Yeah. So if this is active, then it's going to show. But as soon as this whatever menu is here, you can untoggle that and then turn off marker overlays.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome. All right. Let's see. We only have a few minutes left, so let's see if anyone else has some questions. Type into the chat or just start chatting. And unmute yourself if you want. In the next couple minutes, I want to just do a little bit about transitions. And let's see. some titles, and some render setting stuff. If anyone wants to see anything else in the few minutes we have, let me know. All right. If I upgrade from the free version to 18 to Studio 18.5, will that impact my project or delete anything? I've been scared to do it. Don't be scared. It's okay. We'll get you through it. So, couple things. Free version to Studio, there is no impact. You still have access to everything. One important thing to know. Get familiar with where your project library is. I said, there is a database, not individual project files, but it is still somewhere on your computer. If I go to, so I'm in my project libraries, I have this sidebar open. I can see all of my project libraries. You probably just have one default one. I have a few. But if you click on this details thing right there, you can reveal it in Finder. And so I can see that. So if for whatever reason I install Resolve again, or I delete Resolve and then reinstall it, and then my projects don't show up, if you know where this location is on your computer, then I can add a project library by connecting to an existing location. So then I just need to find that on my computer, wherever that was, and then click connect. So if I can actually disconnect, which from that project library here, I can remove it, but it doesn't delete any of those projects or files. They still exist. So if you've upgraded versions, like going from free to Studio, all you'll need to do, if you don't see them here by default, add a project library, connect to it here, and by finding that location again and you may want to save this location or write it down or star it or whatever you need to do, but going into the reveal and Finder, and now you have that location. And now going from between versions, like 18.5 to 18.6 or 18.6 to 19. 19 is still in beta, so use at your own risk. I use it because I like to live dangerously. There are often database, project library, or project format upgrades. So once you upgrade to that new version, and you open that project in that new version, so let's say going from 18 to 18.6, it may ask you to upgrade your project library, and you won't be able to downgrade it back if something goes wrong. So a good thing to get in the habit of doing is, let's say I click my project library here, click on the I click back up. I back it up. I can name it. So this is training Resolve. I could just name it V19 because I'm on version 19. So that way, if I try to open it up in a different version, I will know why it's not working. So if I'm going from 18, for example, I'll call it V18, and then save it somewhere. And then that way, if something goes wrong, I can always go back and restore from a backup. I can also duplicate things, so I just have a total copy, but that doesn't actually help you from upgrading, downgrading between versions. So as long as you have things backed up and you know where those files are, there is a solution. So backup, backup, backup. David's asking about recording and where that would be available. I have no idea. You will, I'm assuming, get an email. We'll figure it out and send you the details. So by the time the recording is available and you've received an email, you will know, and we will know. I'll let you know. All right, cool. Let's do a little bit of titling. As you're creating titles, graphics, whatever, credits for your movie, you may want to add some titles. So let's say this is a nice looking shot and I want a title of the movie to show up. I have in here under my effects a bunch of stuff. And one of these, if I open it, if you're not seeing a sidebar, just click on the sidebar button right here and I can navigate into Toolbox. I go down to titles and I have a whole bunch of options. And for me, if I hover over this, I can see what that title is and what it's doing. There's a lot of different things here. And sometimes they have an animation. If you're not seeing an animation, sometimes it doesn't show up if you're on a slower computer, but there's a setting here on the three dots menu, hover scrub preview, that is currently checked. So because it's checked and I hover over this effect here, I can see what that looks like. I kind of like that. That's cool too. Well, that's fun. Let's use it for now. So I'm going to drag this jitter title, and I'm just going to drag it above my video onto this second track. I can scroll into it. I can affect the length of it just by dragging it around. And once I have it selected, I can go to my inspector in the upper right corner, click on that, and there's this text box, title of movie.
Wait. How
Yeah.
come when you open the inspector, you still have to screen monitors, and I don't? When I open my inspector, it just shows me the timeline. It doesn't show me the other window.
It may be based on your resolution. You may have closed it. So I have a button here. This rectangle will put me into single viewer mode. I also have a fairly large monitor, so there is just enough room for things to show up. Sometimes Resolve will respond based on the size of your monitor to changing the interface slightly. So it could be that.
Is that because you're on 19? Because as 18.6, I don't see that icon.
No,
I don't see
it
that.
is. It's there, and like above the viewer, above the timeline viewer. You're on the edit page?
Okay, I'm in the edit page. I'm closing the inspector. And
it might, if you have a smaller screen, it might actually be in the three dot menu.
Okay, so if I click that, it becomes only one.
Correct.
One, right. And I do two, I have the two monitors. But when I open the inspector, it just, it just shows me the timeline window, not the
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that may be based on the resolution of your screen. Sometimes Resolve will adapt because if you have a limited amount of resolution, then it will move things around just so you see the essentials.
And also, how do I show how long the timeline, how long is the in and out of that I chose in the timeline? Because I see the timeline address above, but if I want to see just like the in and out, the length, like how many frames is the in and out that I chose in the timeline, where is that? How do I show that timeline? I don't see.
You mean of the individual clips?
No, of the in and out.
It's like what the in and out points of
the
clips in the timeline.
Timeline, yes.
Yeah.
To see the length of it. How do I show it? Because what it gives me is just source time code, source frame, record time code, record frame, but it doesn't have the duration, like in and out duration.
Yeah, but are you talking about the duration of the clip itself, or what the in and out points are?
Of the in and out, not the clip itself, but the in and out in the timeline.
Yeah, and you mean and you're not talking about data burn-in, like an overlay?
No, I'm talking about in the, above you do have on the left, you can choose if the frames or the time code. Then you have another time code on the right, which is you can choose whether the source time code, source frame, the record time code, record frame, key code, but there is no duration. No. It's like go on the edit, right? You have the two windows, right? So you see on the right, up there. See that time code up there?
Yes.
That there. So the choices that you do have in there, it doesn't give you a duration. See, there you go.
Correct. Yes. So there are a couple ways of getting some different data around the clip. You can like view the clip duration just by right-clicking change clip duration, and it will tell you the duration of the clip itself. otherwise I have my edit index up here, and then I can see everything about every clip. So if I go over to this one, I see what's highlighted, and I see the source in, source out, the duration in the timeline, the in and out points of the timeline of where that clip is in the timeline itself.
Right, but that's not what I want to know. In the sequence itself, I have an
Yes.
in and an out, and it
Yep.
may comprehend more than one clip. Meaning that I have an in one clip and the out is 2 clips later. So I need to know the duration of that in and out on the timeline.
Gotcha.
Exactly. There you go. That one there.
Yeah. So you're wanting to select in and out points on the timeline. Okay. So when you have the timeline selected, just right here, I'm going to hit I on my keyboard, and just somewhere
right
over here,
there, yes.
I'm gonna hit out.
What's the duration?
So that was that is a good question. I thought that would show up here.
It shouldn't appear in the clip, maybe on the timeline itself, in the bin, but it just, it's like,
Well, here's one way to do it. So I can select my in and out to a duration marker. And now I can double click that marker and see what the duration is.
okay, all right.
That's certainly one way to do it.
So you put markers and you check the markers.
Yeah. I don't know that I've done that before.
Avid has it, yeah, that you can just choose another field, add another
Right.
field. In that field, it always shows you the duration of the
Let me look into that. I don't know if there's another way to do that,
Is that on the
other
left
than
side of the source on the other record viewer on the top, the left side. Go up to that. Go up.
oh yeah, that
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
No, that's
There you go. Yeah. Well, that is it.
where?
Yeah, so you're right. Thank you for that. So if I had hit in and out points, now this time code right here changes from my source time code into the length of this.
Oh, this is the one of in and out. So because there was no in and out, it showed me from the beginning to the end. But if you put an in and out, that is the duration of the in and out.
That is correct. Yeah. So because right now it's just showing me by default that, yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you.
I rarely look at that one because it's always the length of the timeline itself. But yeah, I hit in and out, and now it's the length of my selection.
Excellent.
See, I learned something too. Thank you very much. And then to get rid of those points, I've selected in and out. You can use just while we're dealing with in and out on the timeline, if anyone else needs it, you can use these points to render just that section on your timeline. You can do a quick export of just that. And to clear those points, I'm hitting Option X on my keyboard. We're basically out of time, but I want to do a minute on the deliver page because that's important. Anything you have done on the timeline, if you click over to deliver page at the bottom, this is one way to render things out and you have a bunch of presets and settings. The presets are pretty good for most things. So if you're sending it to YouTube, you can click YouTube, you can select 2160p if you're exporting 4K. It doesn't give you too many options, which to me is a good thing. So there's less that can go wrong. If you know exactly what you're doing, you can go over to custom export and choose absolutely everything. That is a lot of features, a lot of things to have to know though. This will work for plenty of things. The other thing worth mentioning is if we're back on the edit page or most other pages, there is this quick export button. If I click that, I have a couple options without being able to change any setting except the codec. I can do H.264, H.265. If I'm just doing a preview for, if I've been editing and I'm sending this to a collaborator, it's pretty easy to just choose an H.264 or something like that. Even the YouTube settings is the same actual setting. So I can select one of these, click export. It will ask me where I want to render to, and I hit save, and then it will start rendering. So if you do just want a quick export, use the quick export feature. For the deliver page, I can set, if I want, I can set my render range right here to in and out range. So I can hit in over here and out over there, and it's just going to render that. Or I can select entire timeline, give my file a name, movie. I choose where it's going to render to. I hit add to render queue, and nothing happens because it's just creating a lineup of things to render. So I could create a couple different versions if I want to. I can also do, let's say, a very small one, add that to render a queue. And now I have a couple options, or a couple different jobs in my render queue. And I can hit shift and click to highlight them all. And then I click on this render all button, and then it starts rendering all. So you do that, it will take some time depending on how fast your computer is. So good time to click that button, go out for a walk, and then come back when it is done. I know that was a lot to cover in not a lot of time, and there's always more to cover. So thanks for bearing with that whirlwind of information if it was to you. And if there's more you want to learn, let me know that too.